Congress is slow them down a little bit. It is simple math. When Boehner goes to sit down with Obama and Harry Reid, it's 2 against 1. When you only control 1/2 of 1/3 of the government, I know people say, I'm tired of hearing that, Kelly. I'm telling you, it's simple math. We have passed legislation in the House early on that was tabled in the Senate. And when I see people get on TV and say, they're terrible, they're not doing their job, they need to go back, this Congress, these congressmen are terrible, my answer is, look, there's actually 2 chambers. There's a House of Representatives and there's a Senate. The House of Representatives, with the majority that we have right now, have been able to pass legislation. We passed a budget. These other guys walked away a year ago not even passing a budget. And they'll rail about the budget that we passed, but won't defend the fact that they didn't even bother to pass the budget. They'll talk about us being hardliners and not wanting to negotiate. They'll say these guys are so caught up in their ideology that they're willing to shut down your government. They're willing to let our soldiers go unpaid. They're willing to let our seniors lose their Medicare. They're willing to let our seniors lose their Social Security. They're willing to do all these things. And that absolute truth is that's false, and we know that. That's an old line that's been played too long. And we got to stop biting on it. Now what we can do is to stay together. And we can understand that all these things, H.R. 1, that went through very early on to repeal Obamacare, the Ryan budget, which was passed bipartisan in our House of Representatives, has been refused, have been debated, won't be talked about, won't be amended by the Senate. There are absolutely no earmarks in this Congress. That was a Republican initiative. The FAA bill that you heard so much about, how could they shut down the FAA? Why? I heard a reporter called me and said, Kelly, I can't believe you guys went out of session without passing the FAA bill. And I said, well, I got to tell you something. We actually did. Go back in the congressional record and look at 323 on July 20th, and you'll find out that we passed it. And we sent it to the Senate. Mr. Reid chose not to talk about it. Cut, cap, and balance, which makes sense to most of us. You got to cut some spending. You got to put caps on it, so we can't allow these people to go above that, and then we got to come up with a balanced budget amendment. I would tell you that most of America agrees with that. And the reason they agree with it, because they never realized before the federal government didn't have one. So a lot of what we're doing today is groundbreaking. We're trying to get out a message that makes sense to America. We're trying to do things to at least slow these folks down. But the real battle, the real war, is 2012. We have a majority in the House. We have to keep our majority in the House. The debt ceiling that was just passed, well, we don't all agree with it. Here's what would have happened had we not raised that debt ceiling. Now keep in mind, this is the first time in our history that there are any strings attached to it. You know what the game plan was, and you heard it all over the place. The Republicans are going to shut down the country. They're such ideologues. All they want to talk about is cutting spending. All they want to talk about is protecting all those rich people out there, all those millionaires and billionaires, all those people flying around in corporate jets. That's who they're trying to protect. Had we not done a debt ceiling compromise, and I hate that term, had we not done that, we would have been tagged with shutting down the country. Because you know what we believed? We firmly believed that Paul Ryan's budget that had $6 trillion in cuts, had it been passed in the spring, we wouldn't have to even be worrying about this. But we did know this. The press would have tagged us with being the worst people out there. They would have tagged us with your pensions going upside down. They would have tagged us with us losing our AAA rating. They would have tagged us with everything that they could. Whose lap did it fall into? Well, all those things, even after we raised the debt ceiling, still came true. So now all of a sudden, I will tell you this, America realizes that the king has no clothes. We have witnessed the most expensive sabbatical this country has ever seen. We've got to get this professor out of the White House and back in the classroom. That way he can only affect 20 or 30 at a time instead of all of us. Now, I got to tell you, it's going to be a tough battle. And as I said earlier, people ask me all the time, so what's your answer? And I said, my answer is the same as all of us understand. Could you do it in your personal life? Could you spend money like this in your personal life? Could you do it with your business? So why do you tolerate it in your government? And the other thing I tell people is every one of those people got voted into office. They just didn't go in and sit down. The real power lies with the people. If you're unhappy with their performance, why in God's name would you send them back? It's stupid. And then we point fingers at parties rather than, hey, we've got to get engaged. Now, in the spring here, I think, what was the turnout, Mr. Boyd, about 20% or 22% in the primary? Okay, so who's watching? Now, that's of registered voters, not eligible voters. And I can tell you that the day that the debt ceiling was passed that week, the greatest sigh in America was not the fact that we raised the debt ceiling. It was that the NFL signed their contract, and my gosh, we're going to have a football season.